My name is Elena Brooks, and this is my story told in my own voice, the way I lived it here in America. Christmas Day began the way many of my days did. Quiet, busy, and heavy in a way that didn't show on the surface. I woke before anyone else in the house. The pale winter light barely touching the curtains. The floors were cold under my feet as I walked into the kitchen, pulling my sweater tighter around me. This house was new, still smelled faintly of paint and wood, and yet it already felt old to me. Old with tired thoughts, old with sacrifices stacked inside its walls. The oven hummed softly as I turned it on. I chopped onions, stirred gravy, and laid out dishes with care. Cooking was something I did well, not because I loved it, but because it gave me control. When food was right, no one complained. When plates were full, silence followed. I had learned that early. The house stood in Savannah, Georgia, on a quiet street with neat lawns and polite neighbors who waved but never asked questions. It had a wide porch that wrapped around the front, white railings that needed repainting, and two bathrooms that everyone argued over except me. In the back was a small yard with a crooked oak tree that leaned like an old man listening to secrets. I paid attention to details like that. I always had. The loan for the house sat in my mind every day, heavy and constant. I paid it. I tracked it. I worried about it. Every dollar mattered. I had put more into this house than anyone else, not just in money, but in time and care. Still, I told myself it was worth it. Family meant stability. I thought family meant safety. That was the story I told myself when my chest felt tight. My mother, Diane, had moved in with me after saying she needed help. My younger sister, Belle, came soon after, saying it was only temporary. Temporary has a funny way of becoming permanent when you stop asking questions. I didn't ask, I just adjusted. By mid-morning, the kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of food. Steam rose from the pots, fogging the windows. My hands moved from task to task without pause. I felt tired, but it was the normal kind of tired, the kind I ignored. As I leaned over the stove, a bit of smoke rose from a pan, and without thinking, I walked to the window and pushed it open. Cold air rushed in sharp and sudden. It felt clean against my face like it was trying to wake me up. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, letting the noise of the house fade behind me. That's when I heard voices. They came from the yard clear enough that I knew I wasn't imagining them. I recognized Belle's voice instantly, fast, sharp, and careless. "I can't believe we're stuck with that witch," she said, her tone full of irritation, like she was talking about bad weather or a broken appliance. My body froze. My hands stayed on the window frame. Then my mother spoke. Diane's voice was calm, almost bored. "It's only until she's done paying for the new house loan." There was a pause. Then Belle laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was light and cruel at the same time. "I'll take her part too," she said like it was a joke everyone should enjoy. Something inside me went very still. I didn't gasp. I didn't shake. My heart didn't race the way stories say it should. Instead, everything went quiet like a room after music cuts out. I stood there listening to the hum of the oven behind me and the distant sound of traffic beyond the yard. They kept talking, but I didn't hear the rest. The words I had already heard were enough. They settled into me slowly, sinking deep. I finally understood something I had felt for a long time, but never named. I closed the window gently, careful not to make a sound. The latch clicked softly. I stood there for a moment longer, staring at the glass, my reflection faint and tired. Then I turned back to the stove. I tasted the food. It was good. I added a little salt, stirred once more, and wiped my hands on a towel. I set the table, straightened the napkins, and arranged the plates just the way my mother liked. My movements were calm and smooth, almost practiced. When I carried the food into the dining room, I smiled. I smiled so well that even I almost believed it. "Everything's ready," I said, my voice warm and steady. They sat down talking and laughing, unaware that anything had changed. They ate. They complimented the food. Belle asked for seconds. Diane nodded with approval. I sat with them, passing dishes, listening, smiling at the right moments. I served them with joy. Or at least that's how it looked. I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. I wasn't breaking. I was thinking for the first time in a long while. I wasn't telling myself stories about family or patience or sacrifice. I was looking at the truth, clear and sharp. I saw how they saw me. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as a solution, a payment plan, a temporary tool. As the plates emptied and the conversation drifted to other things, I felt something new take shape inside me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was firm. That Christmas Day, standing in my own kitchen, I didn't lose anything. I found myself, and without anyone noticing, I began to decide what my life would look like next. The next morning came quietly, like it didn't want to draw attention to itself. I woke before the alarm, staring at the ceiling while the house slept around me. The air felt colder than usual. Or maybe that was just how it felt when your mind finally stops lying to you. I got dressed without turning on the light, pulled my coat tight, and stepped outside. The sky was pale and hard, the kind of gray that looks solid, like it could crack if you touched it. I got into my car and started driving toward Atlanta, Georgia. My hands steady on the wheel, my thoughts clear in a way they had never been before. The roads were almost empty, like the city was holding its breath. Streetlights blinked off one by one as the sun slowly rose. I didn't turn on the radio. I wanted silence. I wanted to hear my own thoughts to make sure they were real. With every mile, something heavy slid off my chest. I wasn't running. I wasn't escaping. I was moving forward, and there is a difference. The bank building stood tall and clean, all glass and stone, pretending it was stronger than the people who walked inside. I sat in my car for a moment before getting out, resting my hands in my lap. I thought about the years I had worked extra hours, the weekends I had skipped rest, the small pleasures I had said no to, new shoes, short trips, dinners out. All of it had gone into that house, into keeping everyone comfortable while I stayed quiet. I stepped out of the car and went inside. A man named Marcus Hill greeted me at the counter. He had a calm voice and tired eyes, the kind you get from seeing too many people carry stress into clean rooms. He asked how he could help me, and I looked him straight in the face. "I want to pay off the house loan," I said. He paused, fingers still on the keyboard. "All of it?" he asked, just to be sure. "All of it," I repeated, my voice steady. He nodded slowly, like he understood something more than just numbers. We sat down together, and he pulled up the account. The screen glowed between us, full of dates, payments, and careful records. Every dollar told a story. I watched as he explained the final balance, the forms, the steps. I signed where he pointed. My name looked strong on the page. When it was done, he slid the papers toward me. "It's finished," he said. The number stayed in my mind as I stood up. $86,000. Gone in one morning. Years of effort closed with ink and paper. I expected to feel fear or doubt, but instead, I felt lighter, like I had just set down a bag I had been carrying so long, I forgot it wasn't part of me. I walked out of the bank and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the city move around me. Cars passed. People hurried by with coffee cups and phones pressed to their ears. Life didn't stop just because mine had shifted. I got back into my car and drove on. By noon, I was in Charleston, South Carolina, sitting across from a real estate agent named Miles Carter. His office smelled faintly of coffee and paper. He wore a neat suit and spoke fast, like his words were chasing something. He asked about the house, about the location, about how quickly I wanted to move. "As soon as possible," I said. He smiled, professional and confident. He showed me numbers, charts, and recent sales. He talked about the market like it was a living thing, rising and falling on its own rules. I listened carefully, asking questions when I needed to. I wasn't confused. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was ready. "The house will sell," he said, "and it will sell well." That afternoon, I drove back to Savannah and cleaned the house from top to bottom. Not for them, for me. I wiped the counters, opened the curtains, and let light move through the rooms. I looked at the walls, the floors, the porch, and felt no sadness. The house had served its purpose. That was enough. Later that day, a woman named Nora Bennett came to see it. She arrived with a quiet smile and careful steps, like she respected places that held history. She walked through the rooms slowly, touching door frames, looking out windows, pausing on the porch. She stood in the yard for a long moment, looking at the crooked oak tree. "I can picture my kids here," she said softly. I nodded. "Then it's the right house for you." There was no struggle inside me when I said it. No hesitation, just truth. Things moved quickly after that. Offers came in, papers traveled from office to office. My phone buzzed with updates. I signed where needed, read every line, and asked every question. I didn't rush, but I didn't stall either. This was not an emotional choice anymore. It was a clear one. By the next day, the deal was done. I sat at a clean desk and signed the final papers. My hand didn't shake. The house that had taken my years to build became a stack of documents, neatly clipped together. Ownership transferred. Responsibility moved on. Just like that, when the deposit hit my account, I stared at the screen longer than I expected. The number looked almost unreal. $214,000. More money than I had ever seen in one place. Earned not by luck, but by patience and endurance. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile or cry. I just breathed. For the first time in a long while, I felt like my life was truly mine. No one else's plans sat on my shoulders. No one else's future depended on my silence. As I left the office and stepped back into the open air, I knew something important had changed. This day wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was the day everything finally turned in my favor. That night, back in Savannah, Georgia, the house felt different, like it already knew I was leaving. The walls seemed quieter, the floors less patient with footsteps. I moved slowly, not because I was afraid of being heard, but because I wanted to remember everything clearly. I had lived inside those rooms long enough to know their sounds. The soft creak near the hallway, the loose cabinet door in the kitchen, the way the porch light hummed before fully turning on. I walked through the house like a shadow that knew every corner, every crack, every hidden weight. I went into my bedroom first and closed the door gently. I didn't turn on the main light. I used the small lamp by the bed, the one I bought myself years ago with my first decent paycheck. I opened the closet and took down my clothes, folding them carefully, not fast, not rushed, just calm shirts, sweaters, jeans, a coat. Only what was mine. I left behind everything I had bought for comfort that was never really mine to enjoy. From the dresser, I picked up my old photo box. It was scratched and faded, but strong. Inside were pictures from years ago. Me smiling in places that felt far away now. My father standing beside me with his hand on my shoulder, his smile quiet and proud. I held that photo for a moment longer than the others. My father had believed in fairness. He believed people should stand on their own feet. I slipped the photo back into the box and closed it gently. On the bedside table lay the silver necklace he gave me years before. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in my palm, then placed it carefully into my bag. I packed my laptop next, sliding it into its sleeve like I was protecting a fragile truth. Finally, from the back of a drawer, I took out a small envelope. Inside was $2,400 in cash. I had saved it quietly without plans, just instinct. I put it into my bag and zipped it closed. In the hallway, I stopped. Their voices drifted from the living room, careless and loud. Belle's laugh cut through the air, sharp and confident. Diane's voice followed, steady and certain. They sounded comfortable. They like the ground beneath them could never move. I stood there listening, not angry, not sad, just aware. A strange calm wrapped around me, the kind that comes when a decision has already been made and no longer needs debate. I realized something then. They didn't hear me because they never truly saw me. I had been background noise in my own house. I turned toward the kitchen. The light above the table cast a soft glow across the wood. I pulled out a plain sheet of paper and a pen. No special stationery, no decoration, just honesty. I sat down and wrote slowly, my handwriting neat and steady. I wrote that I heard them on Christmas Day. I wrote that I knew the plan. I wrote that I paid the loan. I wrote that I sold the house. I wrote that they would not use me again. Each sentence was simple, clear, no extra words to soften the truth. When I finished, I stared at the page for a moment, then added one last line at the bottom. You wanted me here only until the money was done. Now the money is done, and so am I. I folded the letter and placed it in the center of the dining table, exactly where the morning light would land first. I imagined Diane walking in, coffee in hand, her eyes catching the paper before anything else. I imagined Belle's face changing as she read, not because I wanted revenge, but because truth has a way of arriving whether you invite it or not. I took one last look around the kitchen. I had cooked so many meals there, cleaned so many messes that weren't mine. I felt no pull to stay. I grabbed my bags and walked to the door. The night air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. It was cold and sharp and full of space. I breathed it in deeply like my lungs were learning something new. I loaded my bags into the car, quietly, closed the trunk, and got into the driver's seat. The house stood behind me, dark and unaware, like a story that had already ended, but hadn't realized it yet. I started the engine and drove away without looking back. The road toward Nashville, Tennessee, stretched ahead of me, empty and open. Streetlights passed in a steady rhythm, and the sound of the tires on the highway felt like a promise. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just drove, feeling the distance build mile by mile between me and everything that had tried to hold me still. Somewhere along the highway, my thoughts drifted to Europe. I used to imagine it as a place where people went to start over, where nobody knew your history, where pain couldn't follow you. I smiled softly at the thought. I didn't need Europe. I didn't need oceans or new languages. I just needed space. Hours later, I pulled into a small motel on the edge of the city. The sign flickered slightly, but the place was clean and quiet. At the desk, I gave a different name, Elena Brown. One letter changed, one small shift. The clerk didn't question it. He handed me a key and wished me a good night. The room was simple. A bed, a table, a mirror on the wall. I locked the door behind me and set my bags down. The silence inside the room felt safe, not empty. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, letting the stillness settle into me. In the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked the same. Same eyes, same lines, same tired softness around the mouth. But something behind my eyes had changed. They were clearer, stronger, awake. That night, as I lay down in a bed that belonged only to me, I understood something deeply for the first time. Leaving wasn't loss. It was return. Weeks passed, then months, and time stopped feeling like something that chased me. After Nashville, I moved again, this time to Denver, Colorado, drawn by nothing more than the need for clean air and distance. The city greeted me with wide skies and sharp light. The mountains stood in the background like quiet guards, solid and uninterested in anyone's family drama. I liked that the air was thin and bright, and it made breathing feel like an act you chose, not something forced on you. I rented a small apartment on the third floor of an old building with creaky stairs and large windows. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor every morning, warming the space without asking permission. Wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I bought a simple couch, a small table, and a bed that didn't carry anyone else's expectations. I paid the rent myself, every dollar clear and accounted for. $1,150 a month, and not a cent of it came with guilt attached. I found work at a local company after a few interviews. My manager, Ethan Rivera, spoke with calm confidence and didn't pry into my past. He cared about deadlines, teamwork, and whether you showed up when you said you would. That was enough for me. I worked hard, but not the way I used to. I no longer gave until I disappeared. I gave what was fair. At work, I became friends with a woman named Tessa Lane. She had an easy laugh and a habit of tapping her pen when she thought. She invited me for coffee one afternoon, and we talked about small things, movies we liked, books we never finished, recipes that failed the first time but worked the second, normal conversations, quiet moments. I realized how long it had been since anyone spoke to me without needing something. And still, my old life found ways to reach me. Not in dramatic scenes or loud confrontations, just through small truths that always travel no matter how far you go. Someone mentioned something. Someone else forwarded a message. A name appeared on my phone. Unexpected, but familiar. Belle and Diane tried to find me. They called old friends. They asked neighbors. They sent messages that sounded kind on the surface and sharp underneath. They painted themselves as confused, worried, abandoned. They left out the parts where they laughed. They left out the window. They left out the plan. But they didn't know where I went, because for the first time in my life, I had left no door open. The house was no longer theirs to stand inside. The walls I had paid for didn't protect them anymore. Bills they had ignored didn't vanish just because I was gone. Comfort doesn't appear out of thin air when you stop respecting the person who provided it. Slowly, their life became smaller, louder, and harder. They blamed me, of course. People like that always do. Blame is easier than memory. One afternoon, while sitting by my window with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed. The message was from a distant cousin, Renee Parker, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her words were simple. "Your mom is telling everyone you abandoned them." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. I waited for the familiar sting of guilt to rise. The urge to explain, to fix, to soften the truth so no one else felt uncomfortable, but it didn't come. What I felt instead was calm, clear, and cool like cold water on tired hands. I typed back slowly. I didn't abandon them. I stopped being used. That was all. I didn't send money. I didn't offer a room. I didn't rush back to solve problems they created while mocking my effort. I didn't write long explanations or defend myself to people who had already chosen a side without asking for the truth. I kept watching from a distance quietly, without pleasure and without pain. Their life grew messy because it was built on expectation instead of effort. That wasn't cruelty. That was consequence. In America, choices have weight. You feel them eventually, whether you want to or not. As time passed, my own life filled with small, solid things. Paychecks that came on time. Evenings spent cooking for myself. Windows open, music low. Walks through the city where no one knew my history. Mornings where I woke up without tension in my chest. I learned how quiet peace can be. I learned that love that demands your pain is not love. I learned that a home that costs your dignity is not a home. Near the end of the year, when winter returned and stores filled with decorations, Christmas came again. I noticed it differently this time. Without fear, without bitterness, just awareness, I invited a few people over. Tessa, a coworker named Liam Foster, and a neighbor, Marisol Grant, who lived downstairs and always smiled when we passed on the stairs. I cooked all day, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The kitchen filled with warmth and familiar smells. But the feeling was different. When I opened the window, cold air rushed in, clean and honest. No voices outside calling me names. No plans whispered behind my back, no laughter built on my silence. We ate together, talked late into the night, and laughed freely. I served food to people who looked at me with respect, who thanked me without expecting more. As I cleared the plates, I realized something important. I didn't win by leaving. I healed by choosing myself.